I'm Heather. I'm with the Center for Nonprofit Resources, and it's my pleasure to be moderating this event with you and with Rachel today. Rachel, welcome back.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be with you all again today.
I know people who were in part one were busy between the sessions. I heard some chatter and saw the evals, so I'll be excited to hear what some of the updates are. Let's see, we'll make the sessions material, oh, it's also being recorded, just an FYI, so no one's surprised by that. We will make the materials and the recording available, so if you have to step away or want to review some materials later, you can. Let's see, want to give a special shout out to any first timers. I know since we've eliminated or removed the barrier of cost and travel, we're getting some new folks, so welcome. Let's see, what else do I have on my notes here? Where we get going? We're in the meeting format, specifically not the webinar format, because we wanted you to see all of each other and use the chat function. So for this particular event, if you have a question, can you please enter it into the chat box? And Rachel may decide to have a discussion or questions as we go along, or may ask to say them to the end. We never really know till we're in the flow. So bear with us on that. And I think that's it. Rachel, take it away.
Oh, thank you so much, Heather, and happy Friday, everyone. Can't believe we are looking at the last Friday in August already. Seems like summer just flew by and we didn't have a summer, but hey, it's all good. We're learning great things and getting ready for year end. So without further ado, I first want to welcome everybody back and say, thank you to those of you that submitted your homework via email. Today's presentation includes some of the homework that was submitted. I have done it anonymously in terms of not calling you out by agency. So when we get to those slides, if you would like to own it and share your thought process behind it, dive right in. But if not, the intent is that we will look at it as each one as a class and figure out how can we make it the strongest we can be. So if you're one of the courageous souls that submitted homework, this is an exciting day because you'll have a ton of advice and fun input from people, your classmates here, to help us apply this knowledge. So I figured that since we have a few new faces and it's been 2 weeks since we last gathered, I would start with a quick reminder of what we covered in our last session. We really looked at 4 things. The importance of starting with our why when we're talking to donors, and compelling people to act. How do you create compelling calls to action that really make them want to click on the donate or whatever your call to action is? Third, how do you know how to make the right ask of people? And lastly, what does a creative, consistent campaign look like? So quick recap on the Find Your Why or Start With Your Why is really based on the teachings of Simon Sinek. And what I was sharing with you is that donors care about why you do what you do and the outcomes that you achieve. They don't so much care about the mechanics of how you do it. And yet when we tell our stories, we tend to start with what we do and how we do it, and few of us ever get to the why. And so that's where the disconnect happens, that when we lead with the what and the how, and we don't get to the why, we've kind of lost people, where when we flip the script and start with the why, we're going to get much higher engagement with donors. So we gave the example that let's say you are an after-school program or even an in-school program that provides children with disabilities extra support so they could learn to read. How would you share your story? And we said we would start by saying we believe that every child deserves a quality education. That's a statement that nobody's going to disagree with you on. So, in sales, we say you get 3 yeses and the 4th one is automatic, right? So this is your first yes, because when the donor reads this, they're going to be like, yeah, I can believe that. I do believe that every child deserves an education. And then we quickly pivot to the how. How do we make that quality education possible? And that's where you talk about the big thing that you do. We help children with learning disabilities learn to read. Now you notice there's no mechanics in the hull, right? It's what's the big idea? What's your big approach? So we don't need to drill into, we recruit tutors from all over. They come and spend an hour a day with a child for 6 months, and none of that is interesting to the donor. All they care about is that what you do, which is the how. We help children learn to read. And then the what becomes, what are you asking me to do as a donor? Not so much what you do in the mechanics. And so I asked each of you to do for homework a little exercise to help you frame your why and know where to start. In terms of the framing, we said there are 4 pieces to it. We want to figure out what is the big vision that we're trying to accomplish. And this is not the vision statement that we have, but really, what would a world that no longer needs us look like? Now, we all know that in our lifetimes, that's unlikely to happen, but we need to make progress towards that goal. And so sharing the big, broad vision of a world where your services are needed helps that donor to have a target to shoot for, right? Then we have to look at what are the obstacles or the enemy that prevent us from achieving those goals. And then who are the heroes that can help make this happen? And finally, who's going to benefit? There's a wonderful book called How to Love Your Donors to Death. It's by Stephen Pidgeon, and he's the one who actually crafted this framework. So if you're looking for some good reading after this, that might be a good option. And looking at how we come up with this fundraising proposition that we're going to create using his framework, we look at what would the world look like, what's preventing it, who can help, and who's going to benefit. And so the third piece that we covered is integrated campaigns. Once you know what your fundraising proposition is, how do you essentially sell it to donors? And we talked about the importance of using multi-channel communications, powerful and consistent images that show up everywhere, whether it's social media, a gift catalog, a billboard. And so this is just a quick refresher of where we journeyed together last week. The final thing we covered was how do you tell your story so that you take what you've built in this framework and then create a compelling case or story for the donor that leads them to take the action. And we said that donors respond to emotion, or as I like to say, emotion empties wallets, right? And so when you think about the anatomy of your story, you want to talk about in the setting and crisis stages, what are the negative emotions you can trigger in a donor? So some kind of outrage or sadness or, something they can empathize with in the person you're trying to help. And then in the unfolding of the story, as you talk about how it was resolved or what interventions happened, that's when you start to use your positive emotions, because you don't want to leave the donor with the idea that this is a hopeless situation. Otherwise, they're not going to act. And so we said we would use a conversational tone in the story and unfold all these things together. Before I dive in, we had one student that sent a really good question, and I thought I would share it with you. And she said, how exactly is the fundraising proposition used? Is it a spoken case for support or in a formal booklet? Is it written out in bullet points like this on a worksheet, or always condensed into one sentence, like 1 in 6 children has a learning disability? Thank you so much for the question. And the answer is all of the above. So if you remember, when we talked about telling stories, we talked about how we have different media that we tell stories on, and each one has their own format, right? So in a direct mail piece, for example, you've got one page back and front that you can make an appeal to donors. If you're looking at an email, you've got about 250 words. If you're looking at Facebook, you're probably looking at 40 words before you hit the read more link. And in a tweet, you've got 140 characters. On Instagram, you've got an image. So your fundraising proposition is used in all of these forms, but like you inferred in your question, how we share that might change depending on the channel. So if you are writing an email, the fundraising proposition could be laid out in bullets, because you have a shorter format. Whereas if you were using it in a direct mail context, which is a printed letter that you send in the mail, you would be able to put paragraphs around things and still use bullets. in your spoken word, if you're talking to people, you can talk with lists, 3 little things that you can tell a donor or use it. But basically the idea is that you are creating a framework where you frame your conversation in terms of the donor's interests and perspectives rather than your own. Without this framework, we tend to speak with the how and the what, and we don't get to the why. Whereas when we have this framework, we know what our big why is. That's our vision, right? And we know what the obstacles are. So that tells the donor, hey, we got work to do together. We help the donor see their role in the story by talking about the heroes who can turn things around. And then finally, we get to the ask, So even though it's a small framework, I would think of it this way. It's kind of like a pair of socks. And it doesn't matter whether you're wearing dress shoes or sneakers. The only thing that changes is the thickness of the socks, So it's the base of what you do for everything. You can use it every way possible, but the format is going to depend on the channel that you're using to tell your story. I hope this makes sense. Can I get a yes in the chat if this makes sense? I have to make sure you all are awake, right? So, all right, lots of yeses coming in. That's awesome. All right, so I thought that as we go through today, what might be fun is for us to take a look at some of the homework assignments that were submitted, and the brave souls that submitted them have the option to remain anonymous or not. And so what I wanted to do was go through each of these frameworks and have you all weigh in on whether you could rephrase something or how it strikes you, especially if it's something that you are not connected to. So in a way, we have a little focus group where you all are being given the opportunity to test out your fundraising proposition. So if this is not yours, please weigh in and put your donor hat on and ask yourself, is this something I would respond to? And what exactly is the trigger that makes me think, ooh, this is something I would want to get involved with? Now, I will preface this by saying that, we all have interests as people. So, for me, if you're about kids with disabilities or education or anything to do with empowerment for low-income people, I'm all over it. I'm not as active in the environmental space or animal rights space, just because where my heart is with those groups primarily. It doesn't mean I'm not interested. So all this is to say, if this mission doesn't resonate with you, don't feel like you have to weigh in. Just follow your heart. And if you have a great suggestion, share it. And let's lift each other up too. If you can think of something that you see here that strikes you, that your classmate did really, really well, let's blow up the chat and just say, I love this about this. So you all ready for the grand experiment? I know I am. So I got this first one from an environmental group, and their vision is a world where resources are managed wisely to benefit people and the planet. So, my first reaction to that was, oh, wouldn't that be awesome to have a world where people take care of the earth? I mean, very, very cool. So as you're thinking about that, it's like, who wouldn't want to be part of that world? Then we look at the obstacles, right? And then one of the obstacles they cited was that cheap disposable goods that are hard to recycle lead to increased waste going to the landfill. From my perspective as a prospective donor, that seems like a problem that's solvable, and we think about, how would we do that? And I'm intrigued now because it does seem like something that we can change. And then you get to the hero of the story, and they say there are policies and technologies to encourage use of recyclable materials and divert waste to the beneficial reuse. At that point, I'm not seeing myself in the hero of this story, right? Now, it doesn't mean that a solution like this can't be the hero. Absolutely, policies and technologies can be the hero, but we want to remember that when we ask of a donor, we have to help them see what their role is in the outcome that you're trying to achieve. And so I would suggest that we change this hero to describe the person who cares about this and the opportunity that they have before them. And then finally, the recipients. In this case, we have described as the recipients community members. And so my suggestion on this one would be to change the recipients to be the individual. The donor is helping themselves, their families, their loved ones, and make it personal, right? Because community members are a little broad and they may not connect necessarily. It's not a strong enough connection for them to say, oh man, I got to sign up for this. So with that context, I want to ask you all to weigh in. We've got really good vision and obstacle here. I don't think we need to change a single thing because they're very clear, they're doable. Where I think we can help our colleague here is on the hero and the recipient. So with your donor hats on, how would you describe the hero in the story if you were going to get involved with this mission? And I'll give you a quick reminder on the context of the hero, just to help you get your noodles going. The hero, in the description, you want people to think, oh, that's me, right? So we used an example of the children with disabilities. The hero was a compassionate person who cared about every child, about no child being left behind. And so when we describe it in those terms and we use a person, so it's a compassionate person, hey, you donor, I'm calling you out. And then who cares about, that connects them. So it's somebody who cares that no child gets left behind. So if we think about the hero in this story and we were to put it in person, as a person, how would you describe that hero? So let's start with the adjective. When we talk about the environment, is it a compassionate person, or is it a health conscious person, or is it somebody who loves the planet, or is it somebody who wants their grandkids to enjoy the same beautiful earth that they have? Yvonne has a great suggestion. Advocates for a healthy planet who care about policies. Oops, I'm losing my thing here. Who care about policies to encourage use, yada, yada, yada. Absolutely. That is a powerful word, Yvonne. Advocates, right? So the term advocate personalizes it. Now you notice she still has policies and technologies in there, but that's not the lead, right? Because people give to people. So you have to connect the dots by framing it in a human context before you get to the second part of asking them for money. So by flipping this script just a little bit to say it's an advocate who cares about the environment, now it's not just the policies. If they care about the environment, the policies will come right after. So you've snuck in a little of your how and what with the policies, Yvonne. And so I would suggest you frame it on an even bigger level. It's an advocate for a healthy planet, because who doesn't want to be an advocate for a healthy planet, So Anna sent a really good suggestion too, eco-conscious person. I love that, and another hero you might think of is a person of faith, because people of faith tend to connect how we care for the planet with the creator who created it. And so you can have multiple heroes depending on your audience. If I was speaking to a group of people of faith, then I would tie that in, because that's a powerful hook. People of faith who believe that the creator has given us the responsibility to care for the earth, for example. So you see, there's no right or wrong answer. You can use your description to reach different segments, and speak to them about the aspect that is going to appeal to them in particular, right? So we've got 3 good suggestions here. The advocates for a healthy planet, that's going to get to your environmentalists that understand that, man, this is serious work. It's not just about changing people's behaviors. It's about changing the structural causes of all this mess, like pollution laws and things like that, So as you think about your hero, try and use a little imagination. Come up with 3 or 4. The important thing is you need an adjective to describe the person who's the hero. So we use advocate, right? Or we use eco-conscious, or we use person of faith, you know, because that's where the person who's reading it is going to hold up a mirror and say, oh, that's me, that's me, that's me. I'm a person of faith. I'm an advocate. I'm eco-conscious. And that's the hook that makes them realize, I've got a place in this story. I love Emily's comment. I love how non-threatening this proposition is. It makes me feel like I can be part of this, even though I sometimes use bad products. Oh, can we all give Emily a hand, please? That is exactly what we're aiming for, Emily. And Tom Ahern, who you're going to have the option to listen to in a couple of weeks. And please, Tom Ahern is one of my heroes. He is somebody I've learned a lot from. I don't know him very well personally. I know him professionally, and I just had the wonderful experience of taking a donor psychology class with him through the Institute of Fundraising in the UK. But Tom says, in donor psychology, the course I just took, sometimes people give you money to ease their consciences, right? And so Emily hit that on the head, that I can feel like I can be part of the solution, even though I know that I don't get it all right. You know, sometimes maybe my kids throw stuff in the trash instead of a recycling bin, and I'm just too tired to go resort things, you know? Or sometimes I use products that are chemical laden because they're less expensive than the ones that are more environmentally friendly. And that's exactly the tension that we are trying to create with the hero in the story. We're trying to say, hey, the good guy in you can do something about this, or the good person in you can do something about this. So this is awesome. You guys are doing great. And then the recipients. Let's think about the recipients for a second. You know, community members, that's a term that we all understand because we're in the trenches and we are working hard. And so we understand what it means by community members, but a donor might feel like that's a little jargony, like what's a community member? You know, is it somebody who's paid a membership fee to join an organization? Is it somebody who works for an environmental company? So we want to personalize it a little more. So thinking about that, the recipients, if we're able to, you know, create a space where we're caring for the earth, who benefits? So I'm going to ask you guys, who could you say benefits that would be a hook for the donor? And I gave you a hint in the dialogue, but if you had to describe it from your point of view as a potential donor, and this organization is successful in doing these things, who benefits? Yes, everyone. Absolutely. Future generations. I love that, April, because it kind of connects to that idea that we are stewards of something precious and that we owe it to future generations to take care of the planet. So, you know, you're tapping into the moral obligation piece as well as the personal benefit. And I love the fact that future generations, doesn't matter whether it's your child or somebody else's child. So, you know, you don't have to worry about, am I speaking to somebody who doesn't have children of their own? So I think that's absolutely brilliant. And so what I'd like to do here is I want to capture your, oops, I went the wrong way here. This is editing on the fly. I don't think it will let me. Once we are finished, I'm going to ask Heather to send me the chat, and I will update or duplicate these slides and put your suggestions in them so that when you get the slides, you can see how we as a class transformed the homework assignment and came up with something that is just magical. So this is wonderful. All right, so now we're going to look at the story. So the person who submitted this one said, you know, one of the stories that she would like to share to animate this fundraising proposition is that investing in a plan today will clean up neighborhoods, and it will allow us to create new jobs and convert recyclable waste into usable products. So I love this. because it shows the donor or prospective donor what's in it for them. And so the only change I would suggest you make in this particular story is they're not investing in the plan. You remember, people give to people. So we have to find a way to humanize that connection. So yes, the plan is the how and the what in terms of what we do, but the story maybe needs to be about somebody who is actively doing that. So maybe you have a volunteer that is going out in the community to do educational workshops to teach people, or maybe you have a donor that has made the personal decision that this is going to be a priority for them, and that they've invested their life, or they feel it's their life's mission to help people understand how easy it is to move the needle here just by changing our behaviors and cleaning up neighborhoods. Maybe it's a school teacher or a student that has organized a cleanup, a garbage pickup or something like that. So the story needs to have as its protagonist or main character a human. So yes, there's going to be a plan. And in the story of telling, the unfolding of the story, when you're talking about that human's connection, that's where you can weave in the plan, but it's not, the plan itself is not the main feature. Does this make sense? Yes, 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 I hope so. All right, lots of yes, yeses. All right, so now guys, I'm ready for you to weigh in with a call to action that rocks. So knowing what you know about how we are going to suggest we modify this framework, instead of using donate as the call to action, we want a short phrase that we can use that the donor is going to have a hard time saying no to. So you'll remember when we did the children with disabilities learning to read, we changed that donate button to I want to help a child to read, right? So if you were changing up the donate button for this, what short phrase would you use as the call to action? Ah, love it, Yvonne. I want a healthier planet for my children. That is brilliant because, it ties the donor's ability to influence the kind of world their children will inherit. Absolutely. Who else has a suggestion here? Sarah says, preserve nature for future generations. Absolutely. And Sarah, if you insert the word I want, it makes that even powerful. I want to preserve nature for future generations. I know it sounds long, right? But it doesn't matter how long it is, but you want them to recognize a phrase, and the I want in there is what connects the donor to say, I have the power to do something about this, right? I just want to pause and give you all a big hand. That was absolutely amazing. Sue says, I want to save the planet. Yes, yes, yes. So we're going to go to the next one, which is, if you think about the emotions that you might trigger. So let's look at the environmental story. You said in the beginning, we want to use words that are triggering negative emotions in the setting and crisis. So as you tell your story about that enemy that we're facing, what are some of the words that we could use that would trigger strong emotions, or phrases that we could use to trigger strong emotions for that donor or reader? And I'll throw one out there to help you all get started. My grandmother was an environmentalist, and she was way ahead of her time in Jamaica. And I remember she used to say to me, the earth is on fire, and if we don't do something about it, it may soon be too late. So that's the kind of framework we're talking. We're setting the stage. The earth is on fire is going to trigger the urgency of now for the donor. And if you're in California, it literally is on fire. And then the other emotion we're triggering in a statement like that is, if we don't do something now, it may soon be too late, is going to trigger anxiety in the donor, like, oh my gosh, we've got to do something about this. So I'm hoping this makes sense. If you were to look at the environmental picture that was prepared before, what are some of the phrases you could say to set up the context for why we're reaching out to this donor? Yes, April says pollution. Pollution sounds like a scary thing, you know? Absolutely, April, you are on the right track. Yvonne says, our natural resources are being depleted. Oh, absolutely. That creates a fear that things are going to run out. And then what, you know? Adam has a great suggestion too. Humans currently eat a credit card worth of plastic per week. There are 30,000 particles of plastic in Lake Erie per square mile. Absolutely, Adam, you are setting up the stage and showing them that it's our behavior that is creating this mess. Absolutely. Joanne says, we are burying our world in plastic. I love that, Joanne. It's a short phrase, and it really is very descriptive. It creates an image in my mind of us looking up and can't see the sky because there's so much plastic between us and the sky. That's a powerful, powerful image. Excellent. Emily says, a sensory description of how a place looks, smells, etc., and then lead into a story about that polluted place and its potential. Emily, I love it because you are building a bridge to the next part of the story with that. And Rosanna says, talk about landfills and toxicity. Absolutely. Man, you guys are amazing at this. I am so, so proud of you. So April had one more. Every piece of plastic that has ever been created still exists somewhere. Ooh, is that convicting ever? To think that there's no regeneration or anything that happens. Absolutely. So now we've got them on the context, right? And we're going to switch gears because now it's time for us to talk about the intervention and the resolution. So we want them to feel like this is something they can do something about. So as you talk about in this environmental group, some of your story unfolding, whether it's the donor that's chosen this as their life's cause, or a volunteer that's going out into the community to educate people, what are some of the phrases we could use that would create positive emotions of hope or pride in the donor? So let me kick things off with a little suggestion here. And I'm giving you a lot of support on this one, but I'm counting on you for the other four because we're just going through the exercise the first time. So I don't want you to feel like I'm giving you a cheat sheet, just trying to guide you through the process and so you can do the next one. So in terms of positive emotions, some of the phrases that I would use are things like, it doesn't have to be this way. When you say it doesn't have to be this way, you're triggering a connection point and getting that donor's thing, oh, it doesn't have to be this way. That means that there's something we can do, you know, and then you lead in with your next part of the story. Forward-thinking volunteers like Joanne are going out into the community every single day to teach kids about their power to live more sustainable lives. You know, something like that is going to be like, oh, that gives me hope. Like, we may have screwed this up in our generation, but the next generation is going to learn a better way to live. And maybe there's a role I can play now. And so as you think about the intervention, you are going to weave words in there like, you know, generous volunteers like Joanne, or, you know, change makers like so-and-so. So again, you're looking for those adjectives that are going to leave people with the idea that this is a problem we can do something about, and we are going to be able to make a change because change is already happening. We are becoming more conscious. We now have recycling bins in almost every household in our city, and 30 years ago there was only one trash can, you know. So you're giving them some hope along the way in sharing those things. All right, I think we are doing really well. So what I'd love to do is switch to the next one. And this time you all are going to do the hard work. So let's just do a quick review together. And when we look at the vision, our classmate has said, every cancer patient deserves someone to provide compassionate support through their cancer journey. Mayhem. I love this because, again, it's people. The vision is, if you have to go through a hard time, you need somebody by your side. Everybody deserves to have somebody by their side. And this is something that the donor can relate to in terms of being a vision, because if you were to say something like, nobody has cancer, that doesn't seem like it's within reach. So what you've presented here as a vision is a really great way to frame your story, because this is something that's fixable and it's a really good ideal. Cancer is always going to be with us, so we ought to do something to make sure that people have the support they need. Excellent. And the obstacle is individuals who think services are only for low-income families. On this one, I think we could help to strengthen this a little bit, because it sounds a little bit as if your enemy is, people's ignorance, which can be a little polarizing. I would say the obstacle for this is not everyone who battles cancer has a support system, right? It's the same way of saying what you're saying, but it just broadens the tent a little bit, so that the obstacle is not everyone has access to the support they need, because then you, hero, can come in here, the donor, and solve that problem, right? So you want that, by framing it this way, as individuals who think services are only for low-income families, if I'm one of those donors that thinks that, you've lost me, right? I'm like, oh, I'm an obstacle, and I don't even read the rest of the story. So by framing it in a positive way, not positive in terms of the lack that's there, but the donor's ability to influence and overcome this obstacle of people not having support systems, now you have created a problem that's solvable for the donor. On the hero part of the story, passionate, compassionate people who provide services to ensure cancer patients have someone to walk beside them during a difficult, uncertain time in their lives. Love this framework, because every hero wants to see themselves as passionate or a compassionate person. Everybody wants to think of themselves as somebody who can help another person in a time of need. So I'm going to throw a challenge out there to you, a different challenge this time. This is a lot of words to describe something very simple. I want each of you to take a look at the hero in this context and shorten it. What is, in the fewest number of words, how could you describe this person that's being described here? So I'm going to give you a few minutes to do that. Heather, I think we need some Alex Trebek music, you know, do, 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 do.
I haven't got sophisticated sound effects yet.
I tell you, I'm not the best singer. I would do it for you, but hey, we're having fun. Oh, look, Sue's on top of the ball here. Sue's the first one, and Sue says, a partner on their journey. Love it. Love it. One suggestion, Sue, partner can have a very technical meaning or commercial meaning or very transactional song. So I would swap the word partner for a companion on the journey, because a companion implies that companions care for each other, you know, and so it just generates that feeling of warmth in that donor. Am I a companion? Yeah. You know, would I want to have a companion? Oh, absolutely. And Ahern just upped it a notch and said a dedicated companion. Ooh, top of the class, Ahern. You've put that adjective in there that they know it's going to be somebody they can count on. That's absolutely brilliant. Yvonne says, compassionate individuals who ensure all patients are supported. I think you're on the right track, Yvonne, definitely. When we use the word supported, though, it again can have a very jargony feel. I think I would up the ante a little bit and say compassionate individuals who ensure all patients have somebody to fight alongside them, right? So you're upping the ante. What does it mean to be supported, right? You're giving them something concrete, somebody to fight beside them. Excellent, excellent. I tell you, this is a talented group, Heather. This is absolutely brilliant. Toledo's a lucky town to have this many creative thinkers here. So this is so much fun. And then the recipients, hundreds of cancer patients who live or work in Hancock County who are battling cancer. Brilliant. Wouldn't change a thing about that. It's very clear. These are your neighbors, people. They're living in Hancock County and they're battling cancer. Very clear description. You've also done a wonderful job of quantifying the need. This is not one person who needs this help or 10 people that need this help. It's hundreds of people that need this help. But it doesn't feel so big that I, as a donor, don't have the capacity to exert influence. If you had said thousands or tens of thousands, you'd have lost me. So this is excellent. Now, the person that submitted this story to go along with the framework wanted to tell the story of a beautiful young girl who was an up-and-coming dancer, full of life. She had aches and pains in her leg attributed to many hours of dancing. It was cancer, a sarcoma that would leave her with a difficult choice of having to amputate her leg. Now, I have to tell you this is an absolutely brilliant choice of a story, but I want you to tell me why I think it's brilliant. Why do you think this story is a brilliant animation of this framework that we're trying to convey? Oh, Anna, you got me. It could be my daughter who loves to dance. 100%. Or your granddaughter, or any child you love. Absolutely. April says it gets your emotions. 100%. It is just, Erin says, I can absolutely see this child. That's the golden ticket of what you are trying to use this framework to do. You want to choose the right story that's going to be a subject that people can connect with. I mean, who can't connect with the idea of a child who loves to dance? Each of us has that child in us, or memories of being that child. And there's so many emotions that can be triggered on the negative side in the setting up of it, you know, the shattered dreams, the fear, the unfairness of it, and then in the hope too that, you know, even if her story doesn't have a happy ending, that you could make her quality of life that much better for whatever time she has, you know. So not all stories have to have a happy ending, and this one didn't. But Emily captures it as well and says, I can picture her and her pain. When you can have a donor feel what just hit us all in the gut, you've got gold. And so congratulations, that story absolutely brings your story to life. And as somebody who lost my own mom to cancer a couple of years ago, I can tell you it's a cruel disease. And I don't think there's a person on the planet that hasn't lost a loved one to cancer. And so this story is going to resonate on so many levels because cancer is so pervasive in our society that because most of us either know or love somebody that's had it, it's going to hit us where we need to. So call to action, what do you think we could use in lieu of a donate button? How would you frame your ask to the donor here? I'm going to call on Emily because you could easily reframe the little phrase that you just used. I can picture her and her pain. You could even rephrase, imagine, Janet, excellent. Will you honor and remember her dance? Oh my gosh, that is absolutely brilliant, Janet. It shows the donor that even though she may never be able to dance again, that you can remember and honor her dance. Can't think of anything more beautiful. Heather, we need to capture this chat and make sure everybody gets it, because that is just like the student passing the professor. I don't think I could have said it better myself. But
Actually, starting a comment in chat, that is such a brilliant, no-cost, easy change that anyone can make that I am confident would change the engagement with donors.
100%. And when I took the class with Tom Ahern, we did a similar exercise like this where we all had to reimagine these calls to action. And one of the things he told us, which I used to do when I was in a development role, was test, test, test. Send the same story, same email, same everything, but just change the phrase that you use in the call to action, and then look to see which one generates a bigger response. Send half your list one version and half your list the other. And this is where I get really excited about donor communications, because just by changing that one phrase, you can absolutely have a huge impact. So Janet, you win the home run on this exercise, and I'm sure the rest of you are going to give her a run for her money in the next one. So, all right. Here we go. So I think we talked about the different emotions and here, so I'm going to skip past this slide here, because we talked about, you know, the fear, the shattered dreams and things like that in the negative side of things. And then on the positive side, being able to honor her by helping her remember to dance again. Janet says, shucks, thanks, I'm new to the advancement world, so this makes me good today. Woo-hoo. You're good every day, Janet. You know, I think one thing I would say, I'm kind of like Heather, I'm a constant lover of learning. And somebody said to me the other day, what do you have left to learn? And I have so much left to learn, but this is exactly why, because when we do education like this and the course that I just completed with Tom, it helps us tap into what we already know and take it to a whole different level. And when magic happens, like what's happening here today, it gives you that feeling of competence. And that's what gets you through those tough days when maybe you got a lot of no's or you're just not feeling it. So I want you to bottle that feeling that you have today, Janet, and hold on to it and remember that you're special, you are enough, you have everything you need to do well. It's just a matter of making time to do this kind of stuff so that you can tap into things that other people don't see. So well done. Thank you. You made my day. All right. So now we're going to move on to the next example, which is mental health. And this can be a tough one. The vision for this one is every person in Lucas County has support and access to mental health treatment and resources. So my comment on this one is more that this speaks more to the what, right? So the what is that people have access to resources. So I think we could reframe the vision to something that's a little more visionary, for lack of a better term. So if everybody has these mental health treatment and resources, what would it do for them? What would our world look like if everybody had access to this? So help us out, help our classmates out here in the chat. How would you reframe that vision of what a world would look like if everybody had access to that? So I'm going to help you out a little bit more, because I know the mental health is tough. It's a tough thing to describe. I think of all the programs I raised money for at Catholic Charities, that was one of the most challenging, especially in a country where there's so much stigma, right? Erin hit the nail on the head. She says, everyone can live a full and healthy life. That's the only change I'd make, Erin. I wouldn't talk about the treatment and resources there. I would just say everyone can live a full and healthy life. That's the big, hairy, audacious goal that we're looking for. The enemy is that some of us have mental health challenges that we need help overcoming. That's really what's preventing all of us from having a full and healthy life, right? And so when we look at the obstacle or the enemy, we've got a good one here. Stigma and lack of supports prevent individuals from accessing treatment and mental health services. And that again speaks to the what in terms of what you do. But if you want to humanize it, the real obstacle is that, you know, some of us have mental health disorders that make it difficult, right? And so that's the obstacle we have to overcome. And in the process of providing treatment and things like that, you can do it. So looking at the obstacle, I think that there's a way we could frame that. Stigma is one issue, but it feels like something too big for the donor to solve. I, as an individual, I'm never going to have the power to help other people realize the stigma is stupid. Mental health is just another disease in many lists of diseases that are part of the human experience. And so as we look at the obstacle, maybe the obstacle is that some individuals don't have access to the mental health services they need to live this life, you know? So that feels more like a problem I, the donor, can help you overcome, because if the only issue is helping people to access treatment, yeah, that's doable. But I can't do anything about the stigma, right? So it's not that the stigma is not an obstacle, it 100% is. It's just that it's not going to help us make our argument with the donor that this is something that they can do something about. So knowing that, we go on to the hero. Compassionate individuals and family members who support and advocate for loved ones who are living with mental health challenges. You're on the right track, absolutely. But I think we could, as a class, help us refine this a little more and make it more succinct and more personal to the donor. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes and ask you to noodle on this and say, if the vision is that everybody can live a healthy and happy life, and the obstacle is that some of us have mental health challenges and don't have the treatment we need to manage those, how do you describe the donor that's the hero in shorter words than we've used here? So I'm going to give you a couple minutes to weigh in on that. Let's break this down because I know this is tough. Let's start using just with single words that describe people that walk alongside people with mental health challenges. Let's just look at adjectives. Other than compassionate, what adjectives could we use? Love it, Erin. Champion, advocate. Yvonne has another good one, caring. April says caring people. Absolutely. So the heroes of the story are caring people, advocates, champions, comforters, right? Because it's a lonely walk. There are a number of things we can use there. And remember, we want to use these adjectives because we want the people who are reading this to say, oh, that's me. I could be an advocate, or I could be a champion, or I'm caring, right? And so absolutely love a supporter. Yes, Nina, that's a good one too. Encourager. So, you know, as you read these heroes and stories, I don't know if you notice a pattern that's happening, that when we are describing the hero, we're looking for adjectives, and the mission doesn't really matter so much in the words that we use, because if you think back to the cancer journey, caring people could apply to that too. So what I encourage you to do when you download the chat or even re-listen to this recording, if you have a little time, I would almost create empty framework here and go and capture all the clever words that your classmates are using to describe the heroes or the obstacles or vision. And you're going to see patterns in there that you can steal for yourself. Christy has a beautiful one, strength partner. Oh my gosh, that is just huge, you know. Accountability partner could also be part of it, in that there's medication compliance that can make a big difference, you know. Friendship partner, I love that. Or just friend, even be a friend to somebody who needs that kind of help. As somebody who has a child with a severe developmental disability, it's not mental health, it's just physical. I can tell you that the people that have helped me, like the nurses that help me to take care of them, to me, they're angels. So don't be afraid to use bold words like angels who walk alongside you, you know. Anything that you can put in there, make that list. I love Joanne has it here. I use the app Word Hippo to find similar words. Love it. Very clever, you know. But the adjective is there to hook the donor and say, oh, that's me. I'm a strength partner. I'm a supporter. I'm caring. Because once they recognize themselves in the hero, ally, great one, Jesse. I'm loving that. An ally. Love it. Because it implies that this is a tough road and you're not alone. I'm going to stand alongside you, love you in all your imperfection, advocate for you, and do all those things. So ally is a powerful word. So excellent, excellent, excellent. So the person that submitted this story sent a really good story. And you can see here that they want to tell the story of Judith, whose mental health began to decline. She couldn't keep a job and she experienced daily panic attacks. She was scared, anxious, and began to spin out of control. I think that's an excellent story to tell. Now I want you to tell me why I think it's an excellent story to tell. So as you look at the story, what makes it the right story? Oh, Anna, brilliant, because I have felt that way at times. You know, I say 2020 is the year of mental gymnastics. And I mean that sincerely. And for me, as a fully functioning adult that does not have mental health challenges most days of the week, it's overwhelming. How much more so is it for people that have it? But in that story, Anna is dead on. That choice of story is powerful because every single person reading it has been through a tough time in their life or knows somebody who's been through a tough time in their life when they could be that Judy, you know? And so having them identify and see themselves in Judy's story triggers that empathy. That is what empties the wallets, you know? Christy says, it's comforting to know you're not alone. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And so in knowing that it's comforting to not be alone, it begs the question, can I be a companion to somebody like Judy? Because she shouldn't have to be alone. What if she didn't have somebody to walk alongside her, right? Joanne says, Judy could be anyone, including me, 100%, especially in 2020. I think it could be every single human being on the planet, you know. Rosanna says, it captures the day-to-day struggles that someone goes through. I want to drill down on that for a second. You know, if you are one of the fortunate people who has never suffered from panic attacks or anxiety, it might not be part of your normal experience to understand what this looks and feels like. So by describing the impact it had on Judy's life, that she couldn't keep a job, you're painting a picture for the daily struggle that it is to be able to even function on a basic level. And I think that's something that is very important for us to do in the storytelling, to recognize that some of our donors may never have been through this experience. And so anything we can do to help them understand what it feels like day to day with empathy and make them feel the feels, that's where you're going to get the big money. Absolutely. And so the call to action, how can we mix it up now? Instead of donate, what call to action could we put for this kind of story? You're welcome, Anna. Anna says she has to hop off and she has been taking notes furiously. And the good thing is, Anna, you can re-listen to the recording and catch what you missed having to leave. But thank you for letting me know. All right, so, on a call to action on a story like this, you could be something as simple as, I want to help people like Judy, or I want to help Judy. I want to be a hero to Judy. I want to stand beside Judy. Those are all things that you could use for this call to action. It doesn't have to be a long, long phrase, I'll stand up for Judy, something like that. So we've talked about the emotions through the chat, so I'm going to skip that one. But now we're going to look at an arts organization, and I love that there's so many different mission types. On this one, the vision is every person has the opportunity to release anxiety, feel confident, and gain control through consistent, accessible art experiences. So on this one, I think the vision is so detailed that I'm not sure whether this is only for people that are disabled, because the word accessible is in there. I don't know if it's only for people who feel anxiety. I don't know. There's a lot of questions I have in terms of this vision. So I think if I were going to refine this vision, I would be a little broader in scope and say something like, every person has the opportunity to use art to heal themselves, because art can do all these things. It can make you feel more confident. It can release anxiety. It can help you feel like you have some control, and anybody can do it, So, but by drilling down too detailed in the vision, it creates more questions than it answers. And so, for the big vision, I would say, everybody has the ability to use art to heal themselves. It doesn't say heal the world, it says heal themselves. So you're really picturing a world where art can heal. And art, who wouldn't embrace that? Because all of us love art in some way, whether it's music or dance or painting or quilting or whatever it is, And then the obstacle on this one, this needs a little bit of tweaking too. The obstacle for a world where art can heal themselves might be something simple as people don't have access to art supplies, or people don't have access to sessions where they can learn new things, or you can really get creative with this. And I don't know enough about your organization to give you the proper framing for it, but the obstacle you're trying to overcome is that people who need healing right now are not able to access the mechanism for the healing, which is art, because you talked about the impact of your organization having to close its doors, So when you look at the obstacle, you could frame it this way, people who depend on art for their health are unable to go to their programs, or something like that. And then the hero on the story, a passionate person who believes every human being deserves to feel included in something that gives them consistency, independence, raises their self-esteem, and provides skills that help them to succeed. All 100% true. And from this statement, I'm guessing it's probably a program that has something to do with people with disabilities. I know you told that to me in the story, but I'm just using the framework. And so when you look at the hero does do all these things, but holding a mirror up to this, I'm lost in the details. So I think I would frame it a little bit differently. And the hero would be somebody who believes in helping people access art. Somebody who, and this needs a little work, and we need to noodle on this as a team. So as I'm talking, think about it, but maybe it's an art lover who wants art to be available to people who can't walk, or an art lover who wants art to be accessible to people who can't purchase art supplies. You know, whatever it is it an art lover? Is it a person who, a special needs mom whose child is excluded from lots of things and is just looking for opportunities for their child to be included? So where I'm going with all of this is to say, your organization is doing an amazing job creating opportunities for people with disabilities to access art. What you have to decide is who your audience is. So I think you have several audiences here. You've got the person who advocates for people with disabilities or inclusion. You've got the art lover. You've got the parent who just needs to be able to drop their kid off. There's lots of different heroes that you could have. And this is a difficult story to tell in its current form, but you actually have a huge opportunity here because it's also a very rich story that, if taken in smaller chunks, could help you reach your audience in a more personal way. So Emily says, what's challenging to our organization is that we work with special needs and Alzheimer's and typically developing people of all ages. That's true, Emily. That had the same challenge at Catholic Charities too, but it doesn't mean you need to speak to all of those people in one statement. So what I would encourage you to do is redo this exercise and look at it through the lens of the people with special needs that you serve. What is your vision for people with special needs, right? And then complete it for that group. And then that's the story you're going to tell to stakeholders or people that care about people with special needs, whether it's parents or social workers or just sympathizers, right? Then do it again with Alzheimer's patients, right? And to me, that's beautiful because the vision for the world of Alzheimer's, one of the things that Alzheimer's patients lose is language, right? And it's very frustrating for them and their caregivers because phrases and words don't come easily to them. And so art can be a way for them to express themselves. And because you're drilling down on that particular group, the story is much more compelling because you have a framework of being able to tell through that lens. So think of this framework as different lenses to view your work. And instead of trying to create one lens to describe everything you do the progressive lenses or bifocals, you know, split your audience and do it. I hope that makes sense. But I love your mission, absolutely. And so the story that Emily chose for this is that somebody with special needs relies on routine in their life. You know, the center was closed, so now they're cut off. And when they opened, that resilient feeling of belonging. And that's another angle too. You know, Emily, people with special needs need to feel like they belong, and their families need to feel like as a family they belong, because most programs only cater to the person with special needs. And so there's this constant separation of activities that the person with a disability can go to and the family is excluded, or the family can go to and the person with disability is excluded. And so if you're, for example, had a center where entire families could come and interact and do art together, that would be magic. And a story to tell, because it's such an unusual experience and it makes you unique, right? So in this exercise, kudos to you for a job well done, Emily. You had a tough job because there's such breadth and depth to your work, and you did an amazing job here. I am only suggesting that you refine it by audience and emotion too, even, you know, the role that you want to talk to. And so she says that's very helpful. Awesome. So the call to action here, if we use the story of the person with special needs that's, you know, happy to be back in the saddle again, you know, a call to action might be, I want to help people with special needs belong, you know, or something like that. All right. We just have a couple more, I think, maybe one more. So
I just want to check in here. I personally don't want to waste a minute on a break because I want to hear what Rachel has to say, but can everyone just quickly type in the chat box yes and no for a very brief, maybe 5-minute bio break?
We can do that, definitely.
Everybody, yes, no, sure, we'll keep going, no.
All righty. So we'll just do this last one and then take a quick break, if that's okay. We have a good mix. All right, because this one's going to be fast. So the last story that we had was a community garden, and you could tell the perspective of a community garden or health, but basically the big vision is every person in Metro Toledo has access to fresh, healthy food. Brilliant. Simple concept, everybody can understand. Story told. Obstacle. 25% of area residents live in poverty and lack fresh access to healthy food, and they have no idea how to grow food for themselves. So that's really two obstacles, right? The first is that they lack the access, and the second is that they don't know how to grow it themselves. I think I would stick with the first. Let's say 25% of residents live in poverty and lack access, because that's a problem that the donor is going to latch on to and say, yes, I can absolutely feed somebody. They might have a question about whether it's important to teach them to grow it themselves or just give it to them. You know, that gets into philosophical arguments. So keep it simple. People lack access. Hero, community-minded people who care about the health and well-being of others. Love that. Absolutely love that. And then thousands of low-income and moderate, nothing wrong with recipients. What I love here is the story. The story that goes with this is that Deb purchased an empty lot near her property, and her dream is to convert it to a garden that would bring neighbors together, particularly low-income individuals with limited mobility living in the apartment complex across the street. Hugely powerful story. It's unusual. It gets people thinking, shoot, I could do that. I love there's so many mechanics that make this brilliant in terms of people of different economic statuses socializing, coming together to do something good. So this is a really, really powerful story. You do want to be careful to make sure that it has a resolution, though. So when you talk about her dream is to convert it into that garden, then the ask becomes what that donor can do to make that dream a reality, right? And so that's what your ask is. And so with this, I just want one last thing before we take a bio break. What would your call to action be if this is the story and this is the framework for this community garden? So you can type it into the chat, go back for a quick bio break, and we are going to resume at 11:20. How's that?
Sounds great. Welcome back to another episode. System is recording. You can see that in the upper left.
Yeah, we're just on a quick break. We're going to restart at 11:20.
Rachel, I never know if our computers say the same time or not. Mine says 11:19. What does yours say?
I'm not, I was just looking at my cell phone. It's 11:19. We'll give them a few more seconds.
Okay.
All right, welcome back. Welcome back, welcome back. Before we dive back into the call to action for this community garden, Yvonne asked a question, and so did Rosanna. She says, my story was actually longer. It had the resolution. Are you saying the story should be this brief? No, Yvonne. You absolutely need to include the resolution in the story. I was just shortening the story you submitted so that we could fit it on the slide, and it was more about finding a topic or a subject that would be very compelling without actually having to reveal the whole story. Because the purpose of this exercise was really to help you see, once you have the framework, what stories can animate it and bring it to life. And as we saw in the art example earlier, it can be more than one story, and you definitely need more than one story to animate, because you're going to be using this framework time and time again as you make different appeals through the week, through the year. So didn't mean to imply by shortening your submission that the resolution isn't important. It's absolutely key, because that's what's showing the donor that, hey, it doesn't have to be this way. We can change this, but you're the missing link, because without you, we can't do it. Excellent. Yvonne also just shared that this exercise is very helpful, and she used this approach when she spoke briefly at a fundraising event last week, and it was very well received. Woot, woot. Thank you, Yvonne. I take no credit for the framework. That is the absolute brilliance of Stephen Pidgeon. But I have the same experience when I use it. And in fact, I'm teaching an online course right now that's based on my book. And one of the students had their staff and then their board members go through this process and then compare notes. And it was eye-opening for them because each person had a different perspective of what the organization was trying to achieve and what the obstacles were. And, so it led to lots of productive conversations because they realized that because they'd never gone through this exercise as an organization, their messaging was not consistent. And it was confusing to donors because if you talk to a staff member, they talk about the work differently than if you talk to a board member or, volunteer. And so they actually have decided that they're going to take all the different versions of these frameworks that people came up with and then merge them together and come up with one framework that they will use to animate the opportunity for an individual donor. So the framework gives you the fundraising proposition, and you should only have really one fundraising proposition. I say that with a caveat, which I will get to. But for most organizations that have one main program, that's going to be your fundraising proposition. For groups like Emily's with the art organizations, where they have so many different programs, you may need to have one proposition per program. Or like I had at Catholic Charities, when I had 14 different programs that ranged from HIV to refugee services to elderly care to adult daycare. You might need one fundraising proposition for each program, but at the program level, you have one proposition. So everybody is speaking about the program in the same way, right? So it shouldn't matter whether a community member is hearing the story from a board member, a volunteer, or a staff person. The story needs to be consistent, but that's really the grand view. Emily says, I just don't want to get pigeonholed into people thinking we only work with one type of population. Yeah, that's true, Emily. You won't get pigeonholed because you're going to segment your audience. And so, as you go through your program, you will have you'll have audiences that are very aligned with one particular group or identity. So in my case, I had people that only like to give to HIV or people that only like to give to drug treatment. And so, it's okay to get pigeonholed with those donors because that's the thing they care about. And if you dilute your message to them by sharing all your other work that they have no interest in, they're either going to reduce their giving or they're going to not give at all. And so the real art in fundraising is on segmentation. So you have to know who you're talking to. So for those that are passionate and about a particular group, pigeonhole away, because that's how you're going to get the most bang for your buck. Because the more invested they are in seeing that aspect of your work, the more they're going to give. And then that said, you're going to have a bucket that doesn't fit into any other buckets. So you don't know anything about them. You don't know which program is going to speak to them. And so what I would do with those is rotate your stories on different appeals. So maybe your spring appeal features somebody with a disability. Maybe your summer appeal figures that it's focusing on Alzheimer's, or maybe your fall appeal focuses on families. So you only get pigeonholed if it's the only thing you speak to all the time. So having 3 different versions for 3 different programs is fine. Just segment your group so that if you happen to know the special interests of the donors or people with disabilities, double down on that. And if you don't know, use a different story each time, a different framework, and you'll soon see patterns in what people care about. Some of them won't care. They'll be like, cool, great organization, I'll give anyway. Or some might say, wow, I had no idea you did that. That's totally interesting to me. And as you see people come in, maybe people that didn't give before, that gave to a particular thing, call them and say, hey, thank you so much for partnering with us. I'm curious, what inspired you to make your gift? Because in that question, you're going to get the answer on which segment they belong. That story touched my heart because my child has a disability. yada, yada. Or that story touched my heart because my parent had Alzheimer's. And so that's how you get to know your donors in that way. So I'm not implying that you're going to pigeonhole yourself, but experiment. Have one at the program level so that at least whenever anybody talks about the program, they're using the same playbook. And then as you speak of your work as an organization, rotate through those playbooks until you start to learn what people are responding to. So I hope that makes sense. And Glenna asks, what's the book and author you mentioned? Glenna, on the slide where we talked about the framework, the gray and white slide, his name and the name of the book is on that slide. His name is Stephen Pigeon, like the bird. I forget the name of the book right now. How to Love Your Donors to Death, I think is what it is. But if you look him up, Stephen with a PH and Pigeon, P-I-D-G-E-O-N. He's a longtime fundraiser and just absolutely brilliant mind. The book is thin. It's a very easy read and well worth reading. And he's one of the influences of Tom Ahern too. So, you know, he knows his stuff. All right, so let's look at this community garden example. And we said that, you know, the vision is good. It's like every person in Metro Toledo has access to fresh, healthy food. And that's something everybody can embrace. You know, everybody knows that food is a basic necessity for health. We said that the obstacle is really listed as 2 obstacles here, so pick one. You know, for this, the fact is that 25% of residents live in poverty and lack access to food. And that's the real problem, is the access to food. We're not asking, well, why should people have to grow their own food? If you ask the question another way, you know, those of us who don't live in poverty have options. We can either grow our own food or we can go buy it at the store. Shouldn't low-income people have the same option? So the obstacle is not really that they don't know how to grow food for themselves. Even if they knew, they might not choose to do it. Just like we didn't, and they should have that option. So by doubling down on the lack of access, you don't get lost in the philosophical debates over how that particular person may or may not feel about growing their own food. The hero of the story, community-minded people who care about the health and well-being of others, 100%. And the other thing is, if you want to up the ante a little bit, you know, tap into the emotion. Nobody should have to go hungry, right? Nobody. So hunger is a very powerful, very, very powerful motivator for donors. And, you know, if you need any proof of that, just look at the giving statistics right now. Food banks are killing it when it comes to donations from individuals, because Americans know that those of us who have jobs are lucky to have them, and there are lots of people who don't. And so people are motivated to give more than ever. And what are they giving to? 2 things hugely right now: social justice causes that are working on racial equity, and food. So, you know, as you think about your hero, you know, you can connect that person, even using phrases like, generous people like you who believe nobody should go hungry, you know? So you don't have to emphasize the health, even though we know that's our priority. Hunger can be a bigger trigger than health, you know? So it happens that you're going about it in providing healthy food, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the bigger motivation may be that they don't want people to go hungry, and test it. Go half your list with a health focus like you have here, and half with the hunger, and see which one does better. So if I were going to ask you what call to action you would write, assuming that the story is about this wonderful, generous, crazy dreamer, Deb, who saw the ability that she had to do something about her neighbors by buying this empty lot and, you know, helping people come together to plant a community garden, what call to action could we use for this particular story? Janet asks, would the call to action be, do you believe in Deb's dream? You know, it could, Janet, but I think you run the risk that people say, well, that's her dream, that's not my dream. Great that she's doing that, but what does that have to do with me? You know, it may be a call to action. Sarah just submitted a brilliant one. Help Deb help her neighbors. Love it. So, you know, help Deb help her neighbors is powerful, because Deb is somebody who stood up to do something that most donors wouldn't do. Most of us would not go to the trouble of buying an empty lot. But kudos to you, Deb, for being the hero you are. I'll stand behind you and give you a few bucks to help you bring that dream to reality. 100%, you know? So I love that, Sarah. help Deb, help Deb help her neighbors. I promise you I haven't been drinking. That is a very powerful call to action. I love the one that Ahern has, set the table for a hunger-free community. Oh, gosh, that seems like such a low lift. I must be a real loser if I say no to that. Setting the table is something we do as everyday life. It only takes a few minutes, but improves the dining experience. So that very language and visual of setting a table is powerful to me as a donor, because I'm going to feel awful if I say no to such an easy ask. So that's absolutely brilliant. And I hope you guys are having as much fun with these calls to action as I am, because I just love the creativity. And when you look at all the millions of nonprofits around the world that are raising money now, the ones that connect the donor to the impact they can create are the ones that are raising money. So this is how you stand out from the crowd, and in creating calls to action that allow donors to engage themselves in the solution as if they themselves were doing the work. So this is absolutely brilliant. And we won't talk about the story because we have already done that on that slide. So as you think about your own organizations and your missions here to inspire people to give, and by telling good stories, it really does come down to these 4 things: telling the right story in the right way to the right people at the right time. And I hope that this framework that we've explored together gives you the power to do that, and do it through the eyes of the donor. Tom Ahern, I didn't steal his thunder. When I heard he was coming after me, I played down the U test that he talks so much about, because that's really his thing. And I'm sure he's going to share it with you next week. But the basic premise is that when you want to develop compelling communications that raise money, you don't want to speak about what you, the organization, is doing. So you avoid words like we, or your support. You make it about what the donor can do for the beneficiary, and that's what he calls the U test. And he will literally tell you in every appeal that you write, print it out, circle the word you or your everywhere you've used it in the letter in blue ink. That's good stuff. Circle the we, and talk about the institution in red. Find a way to put it through the eyes of the donor. When you tell your stories through the donor's eyes, and make your ask what they have the opportunity to do for the donor, for the beneficiary, to transform their lives, that is how you raise a ton of money in fundraising. And more importantly, it helps people to reach into the best versions of themselves and buy into the idea that, we are all responsible for each other. We're responsible for our planet. We're responsible for being connected. And whether we like it or not, as human beings, we were created to live in community with others, so why not be part of the solution? So having got your framework done and your calls to action done, the next thing that we need to look at is compelling images. And depending on your mission, this may or may not be a heavy lift. So, if you're working with domestic violence or sexual abuse or trafficking victims or drug treatment or HIV, sometimes it can be hard to get images like this, where you're looking eyeball to eyeball with the subject. And so I want to give you permission to use stock images, and if you don't have the capacity to create your own. And so what I wanted to share with you on this next slide is really a series of websites that I use as resources for images. So I don't know if any of you have ever used canva.com, but it is amazing. So if you've used Canva, say yes, yes. And if you haven't, say no, because if you haven't, this weekend, go to canva.com and have some fun. They have templates for everything there. Natalie says, no, Natalie, we just gave you your ticket to entertainment for hours and hours and hours. It's kind of like Pinterest. You can get lost down there, and it's just a happy thing. You go looking for one idea and you find hundreds more. Canva's kind of like that. So if you're feeling stressed out and you need a little bit of fun, go to canva.com. The account is free. And you're able to generate a ton of graphics. So basically what it is it's a website that's free, or it has a paid subscription that's less than $200 a year. That is money well spent. And they have templates for everything you can imagine: Facebook banner images, you know, Twitter images, Instagram, annual reports, infographics, invitations, anything you could possibly need an image for, they've got a template. On the free version, they have a limited number of free images, and on the paid version, it's like unlimited images. And when you do have to pay on the free version, you might pay $1 for a background. I mean, it's not big bucks. But the cool thing with Canva is it allows you as an individual to create really professional looking graphics in minutes. And so when you're thinking about your appeals or even the donor communications you send out, if you use a stock image, you know, you can always upload it into Canva and change it around, add filters so it doesn't look so stock image-ish, you know. But it's just a great tool for creating compelling images that you can use in anything, whether it's on social media or email or print. The next group I want to tell you about is a group called Pixabay. So pixabay.com. This is a website that has free images. So there's stock images, and they can be cartoons or actual photos, but they're all, people have uploaded them to Pixabay and they give you permission to use it. And they ask you to make a contribution to buy the person who uploaded it coffee. But whether you do or you don't, you're still able to download the images. Some of them in the details when you go to download will have specifics around how they would like to be credited or cited for the use of the image. They will have restrictions on use, but generally they're not very strict on how you can use it. It's often a thing like photo by so-and-so, you know. But that's a great website to get images and can really help you up your wow factor in your communications. Unsplash is another website that has free images. I don't use that one as much, but you know, there are times when I'll go there. It's really good for a lot of nature images and backgrounds and things like that. Pexels is another one, pexels.com. And so, you know, as you explore how you can bring the wow factor to your stories and animate them and bring them to life, you know, these are 3 tools that I highly recommend for you to use. Now, the 5th one you've probably never heard about, and it's also one of my favorite tools. It costs about $50 a month, and it's a tool that allows you to send video messages via email. And so BombBomb is the name. And you basically have the ability to record a quick video, and when you send it by email, it embeds the video in the email. So when people open it up, they see it. You know, it's not like they have to go to YouTube and then look at it on YouTube. It's right there in the email. So, you know, as you think about your campaigns and the stories you want to tell, if you're using your framework, for example, and you want to tell the story of Deb, imagine if you could have Deb record a video that tells her story about this garden, and then the call to action is help Deb help her neighbors. You know, it's a powerful way to tell your story that doesn't require print, you know, or a lot of it, text. So feel free to experiment and try these things out, because the more creative you are, the more you're able to surprise and delight your donors, the more effective you're going to be. And so when I sum up everything that we've covered these last 2 weeks, it really comes down to these 4 things. If you want to raise more money and tell powerful stories, always start with your why, not the how and what. Second, surprise people. Instead of the donate button, create a compelling call to action that connects them to the outcome that they are going to make possible. Make the right ask. You know, make sure that you are asking for the right thing. In a way that they're going to understand, with a story that you tell, choosing the right story. So Deb's story is hugely powerful because it's going to get their attention. You're always raising money for community gardens, but this feels different to the donors. A nice surprise. I'm supporting an individual that's actually living this reality and this call to all of us to care for the planet. And then finally, once you've done the groundwork of laying that framework and getting the right story and, you know, telling it in the right way with the right emotions in the right place, double down on your images, spend the money, or take the time to use those free tools that I shared to create those compelling campaigns. And so with that said, I want to open up the floor to questions and to ask you to share with us not only the questions you have, but Was this helpful to you today? It's usually not my normal format, but I felt like the chance for you to weigh in and help each other with your cases also is important. So we want to hear from you. We've got about 15 minutes left, and the floor is yours. Ahern, feel free to unmute yourself and share your wonderful voice, because it's been me yakking at you for a couple hours. I'm sure your classmates love to hear you.
Sure. Thank you, Rachel. I really did appreciate seeing all of the different types of examples that people shared, and getting a chance to do hands-on practice with the different elements was very helpful, just to see how making small changes in each thing could really make a huge difference.
Absolutely. You know, I think that's what makes it so exciting, is you realize it's not a heavy lift. You're doing all this work anyway. You're just changing the way you think about it, right?
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you so much for sending your homework and doing such, being vulnerable, because this only worked because a few of you brave souls turned your homework in. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We've got a couple of questions here about a copy of the recording. Yes, Heather is going to send a copy of the recording out. And I will leave these slides. Heather will include the link to the slides. I was going to update them myself, but I actually think it would be better for you to update them with the things that resonated with you. So all the placeholders we had for, you know, using the phrases to trigger the emotions, I'm going to leave those slides in there undone, because maybe you want to do this with your teams, and that way you can edit the PowerPoint with your teams and, you know, not give them the answers up front. So later today or tomorrow, Heather will send out the slides. And Heather, I know you'll save the chat too. So with Zoom, you're able to look at the chat. So when you do get the links from Heather and you go to the recording, there should be a button where you can view the chat. And much of the rich content that we had here was generated by your classmates in the chat. So, you know, feel free to take a look at those as well. April says, I'm not sure who did the environmental slide, but if that is a local org, I would love to know more about them. Woo-hoo! Speak up, environmentalists. Claim your power now. You've got a new donor and advocate and volunteer and fan in April. So who was the environmental slide?
So, hi, that was me, Erin Cocktel. And actually, so I work for a for-profit consulting firm who works with local governments who are doing environmental planning. So I can't exactly take you on as a donor, but feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, and we can chat more about how you could do that locally.
Absolutely. And remember, you all have the ability to drop private messages to each other. So if you want to exchange email addresses, go for it. And thank you so much for that amazing work that you're doing. Joanne asked the question, can you reuse a story? And is it possible to repeat a story after some time? 100% you can. Absolutely. In fact, when we talked about the multi-channel campaigns, you'll see that we said we could use the one big story and snippetize it for different channels. So if you were on the webinar 2 weeks ago, we talked about, instead of having different stories on different channels, you use a single story and share snippets based on the format of that channel. Reusing stories, it depends how often you communicate with your donors. You know, if you're sending them regular content, absolutely, especially if it's email, because email, people may have read it or they may not. And even direct mail, people tend to read it and throw it away, and they're bombarded. But I would give a little time in between reusing, but you can absolutely reuse them, definitely. So I'm going to ask one last question and ask you all to weigh in, either in voice, which would be nice so we can hear your lovely voices, or in the chat. What's one thing you learned in storytelling that was worth the price of admission that's going to be a game changer for you?
Can I pipe up here? Yvonne from Toledo Grows. Just focusing my thoughts, focusing it on the 4 different things, you know, the the problem, the obstacles, the hero, the recipient, or the vision, starting with that, just focusing that was really helpful to me. And I just want to acknowledge too that this must be a difficult process for you, because I'm looking at the screen and you're looking at about 2 faces and a whole bunch of names. So this must be really difficult for you to run this workshop and feel like you're getting some feedback when all you're seeing is, blank screen. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Yvonne. I do this a lot, at least 3 times a week. And at first it was, took a little getting used to, but you learn a few tricks to the trade along the way. I love when people share their cameras, because then I can see, am I seeing blank stares?
Right.
In person, you can see if you're boring people to tears or they get connecting the dots, but it's a little bit different. But the engagements, that's why I ask you to type yes, yes, if you're following along, or give me a thumbs up, because all those things help to drive engagement. And the only reason it worked here is because you all were such a fantastic audience, and participating, you had your whole hearts in it, you're helping each other out. So I really love that. And you're a special group. So thank you so much for that gift. Anybody else want to share? Glenna, I'm going to see if you want to say yours out loud. What was helpful to you? Okay, there you go.
Yes, I've had some other frameworks that tell the story in different ways and focus on, very small, like one person instead of all the statistics. But this framework is a little different, so I'm really anxious to get in and tell our story with this framework to see how it works. So thank you. I'm sorry I missed the first class, so I feel like I'm a little behind.
It's available. So if you shoot Heather a quick email, I'm sure she'll make sure you have it. And maybe they'll even be in the same email with this one, right, Heather? The recording from this one?
It's already out there in the blog. So you can go to c4mpr.org and go to the Gearing Up blog, and you'll see it as one of the most recent entries.
Absolutely. Rosanna says here, it's the simple keywords to use when putting a story together. Absolutely. The words that trigger emotions, those are the real power, and making things accessible, And so I have 2 requests of all of you, and I want to ask you to help us with a special project. These 2 workshops were brought to you by the Center for Nonprofit Excellence, and there's a little bit of an experiment going on in terms of how they offer workshops. Traditionally they had a fee and they were live and in person. And now the Community Foundation is given a grant so that they can make these accessible to you for free. So if this was really something special for you and you got lots of value out of it, would you take a moment and just send Heather an email that shares with her how valuable it was and what it's going to mean for your organization? Because like many capacity building providers, funding is always a challenge. And so we need to arm Heather with all the good feedback that can be helpful in showing her funders that this was a wise investment for her to make. They're doing great work, and we can help her make sure that she can do more great work. And then the second I'm going to ask of you is, those of you who have read my book, if you have a few seconds and can go on Amazon and just leave me a review, that would be amazing, because there are just getting a lot of traction, and it helps me in the search ratings if the more reviews you have, and more importantly, it helps people to find the book when they're looking for books on fundraising. And so I want to close by Jesse's comment here. The most important thing that he saw was the golden rule: segment your why and match the appeal with a donor's values. It really does come down to that, and Tom's probably going to tell you more of that week. The more you align what you're doing with the values and the best self of who that donor is, and the more they see themselves and the best version of themselves in your work, the more committed they're going to be to you. So I want to thank you all for joining me. Please connect with me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, wherever you like, and tell me your stories when you try this out. If you have some wins, share them with me. And if you have things that don't go so well, share those too, because we're all in this together. And Janet, special shout out to you for making my day by saying how encouraged you were by the feedback that we all gave you. You're all unicorns doing things that are amazing at a time when the planet is hurting, and what you do matters, and it's exhausting work. It can be draining, and there can be some days when you really feel like giving up, but keep at it. You are changing the world in your neighborhoods, in your region, and one person at a time. So thank you so much for allowing me to journey beside you, and I'm going to turn it back over to you, Heather.
Great, thank you. Thank you for everything, Rachel. Can you all see my slide now on the Center for Nonprofit Resources? Yes, yes. Can you see it, Rachel?
Yes, I can. Sorry, I didn't realize you were talking to me.
Okay. So several times, Tom Ahern has been mentioned. We are able to bring, I mean, he really is a guru. I'm not officially from the fundraising world myself, and this is not an exaggeration. People clutch their heart and gasp a little when they find out that Tom Ahern is coming to the center. He's kind of a big deal. And AF is generously helping us make that happen along with Greater Toledo Community Foundation. So if you want to continue in this track, because if you're not subscribed to our newsletter, e-news, I would encourage you to do so. This is where we make all the major announcements. And if you saw in the past couple of issues, we've been talking about tracks that have been assembled through the rest of the year. So this is the back half of the track in communications and fundraising, and you can go on to the site. There's also a third, oh, it's on my other one. There's a third part in this series, which Zach Huber from the library is going to be leading us. Now, it did have the prerequisite of participating in Rachel's, so you won't find it out there. You're going to get something from me that says, here's all your information to get into this intensive. And if you're able to join us, it's on September the 10th. And if you're not able to join us, if you did participate in at least one of the 2 Rachel sessions, we'll be able to get you a recording and the materials for that. I always love to get emails talking about your level of satisfaction because they're easy to forward to my boss. And not for me, for you, exactly what Rachel was saying in terms of letting people know what their return on investment is. However, if you're new to our workshops here, and welcome all the people who are the first time, we do evaluations. Hopefully you consider them short. I promise you, we look at all the pieces that come in, and we're always making adjustments based on your feedback. So you will be receiving that. And if you could just take, I think it takes about 10 minutes to fill out. If you could get us that information back, that'd be great. And then I just want to wrap up by letting you know, it is really important to us, the voice you have in our system as clients. And we're working with the Great Lakes Marketing Group. And they are going to be conducting an online survey that you all are going to get an invitation to. If you could take the time to please complete that research piece, we are dialing all of your feedback into the plans that are going to be going, one, post-COVID, because we can't assume that we're going to be the same, just like many of you are pivoting out there. And 2, going into 2021, what does that look like? So if you have any questions about that, let me know. I think we're going to be releasing that link right after Labor Day. So if you don't get it, please reach out to me because it's intended to include as many voices as we can. So with that, I will be sending out the video replay and the materials. It's likely to be late Monday, early Tuesday, by the time we get everything rendered and downloaded and packaged and everything. And if you need anything else at all, please reach out to us. I'm really delighted that you were able to take advantage of these gifts of the online and no-cost workshop. So thanks again, Rachel.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure. You all have been the best part of my week, and I am so lucky to do this work. And a lot of what I learned from Tom. So I really hope that you'll not only choose to attend yourself, but let's break Zoom and tell so many nonprofit friends that, you know, there's good stuff here at the Center for Nonprofit Excellence, because if you want to see more workshops like this in 2021, the more people that register, the more the need is going to be demonstrated in the community, and Heather's going to have an easier time getting them to invest in this. So don't keep the good news to yourself. Tell everybody you know and get them to sign up too. So thank you all, and have a wonderful weekend.
Weekend.